the artist presentation as well, and I got a couple of backups for you. So if you didn't find a partner, right, you have kind of two options. Option one is going to be you can do sort of like an infogram. All right, so what might that look like? So let's take a look at you. Okay, so the concept of an infographic, right, is that you have this sort of central subject. You have some sort of intention of what you want to say with your poster, right? So it's kind of like a hybrid of a poster. You are allowed to use digital for this. You can use analog. You could actually use the materials that you have and draw it, right? It doesn't need to be a traditional like graphic you might see that's online, right? So there's a lot of ways to approach this. If I think of one, right, here's one where it's kind of carrying you across Banksy and just going around the world. So the theme is looking at Banksy work across the world. So it starts off in the UK, bounces to San Francisco, to Boston. It's a little funny though, what is you might have to think about this if you're saying around the world, do you want to give us some sort of logical structure for that? Or is it just kind of just tossing things together, right? Me personally, I might be thinking well, how does this relate to the location? Like the UK and San Francisco are quite separate in their area, but then it bounces back to Boston, right? So think about that logical order of how this can connect. But they're giving little snippets on what they find interesting about this particular work, and then they're kind of carrying you through this trip across the world. So really cool theme, right? And that allows you to have an avenue. This one's actually quite large because they really wanted to do a lot. Other ones, maybe you're more of an illustrator and you want to think about a specific topic. So this is kind of about an artist, but the theme here is they're using sort of like a comic theme, almost like storyboarding of how Marinetti had influenced, the work that was done by him influenced culture around him and beyond. So, how it got influenced in graphic design, architecture, painting, sculpture, what it looks kind of like a representation of what it might look like, or sort of the theme or the topic there. So I thought this was another nice one to include. I'll have these examples in your actual for you by our Zoom session. Here's another one where it's more graphic, right? But it is thinking about Dali, right? And it's taking Dali as the central place. It has some really brief biographical information, but it kind of gives a structure here. And then what I find interesting about this one is, there's kind of in 1917, blah, blah, blah. But I think what's interesting are the interesting facts and inventions that are kind of tied to Dali and maybe things that were inspired by. So that's where it starts to get a little more interesting. So these are just visual ways or just different ways of looking at an infographic as a visual representation. Your third option is essentially going to be a paper, right? So if you're I'd rather write a paper, then you got that option as well. That'll be sort of the third option if you didn't have a partner. Right now, if some of you want to check with me on a quick alteration on your plan, feel free to do that. This other piece is on Yayoi Kasuma. I think what's interesting here is they talk a little bit about her career, but then they go into locations where she's been seen, representation, then tying it to money, but then going into how that's related to collaborations with, say, consumer culture. So that then it starts getting into, now this one's very brief, but it takes a lot to find this data, and it also takes a bit to visualize the data. This graphic, deceivingly simple, would take a long time in order to get that to look good, and then also have it be an accurate depiction. So I think you really think about how realistic your graphics are. There might be something that you find online that you could alter or draw it and still get that communication. Notice that the red dot theme is going throughout the infographic. So you see it here on the timeline, and then you also see that red dot repeated almost like a city dot or a map tack on a map, and then it's repeated here with the auction sales. So there is some consistency here, and also consistency in the color choices, right? And just by changing contrast. So this is mostly a monochromatic setup. Another way to think about it. So those are sort of your options there.